Okay.
Greetings. Welcome to Jackson Snyder Presents. I have with me today Liz. She's in the United Kingdom. There's a little bit of a time difference between us, but we're both happy. I'm going to let Liz talk a little bit about the biblical connection between Agenda 21 and some of these UN resolutions. We didn't know there was a biblical connection, but we're going to find out right now. Okay, Liz, tell us about it.
Okay. Is it all right with you if I pray to start?
Of course.
Lovely. Thank you so much. I'm just going to cover to do that.
All right.
Heavenly Father, I just ask that you would be with us during this time and that you would get this message out and that you would have people hear what you want them to hear and receive the information that you want them to receive. And Lord, if I misspeak at any point, I ask that would not land with those who are listening. And I ask that you would just be present with us and help us to get your message out. Thank you so much. And this I pray in Yeshua's holy name. Amen.
Hallelujah.
Thank you. All right. So Agenda 21 was designed really to be implemented, as I understand it, by local authorities. So this was done with the idea that it would take place as part of sustainable development goals by local authorities, county authorities, and so on, regional stuff. And it really seems to have been done in that way that most people are not aware of it at all. If I talk to people, they've never heard of Agenda 21. Agenda 2030 seems to be being implemented much more openly. And we're hearing more about Agenda 2030. And I'm not quite sure if that's because they've softened us up for it. You know, that's kind of the impression I get. People are much more eco-aware, so they're more open to this idea. And the Sustainable Development Goals, I will say they are open to interpretation, and those interpretations can be highly harmful to human life. And one of the things I'm going to can I actually do a screen share? Is that possible?
Yes, you can.
Okay, how do I do that?
Well, you've got at the bottom of your screen, you have a little green rectangle there that says share.
Click that.
You click on that and then you choose the screen that you want to share.
Right, here we go. That's the one I want to share. Okay, so hopefully you can see this meme. This is the meme that's come from the victims of communism.
You've got
the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation.
Okay.
And yeah, great. So if you look at North Korea, it's almost dark. And you look at South Korea, and it's very much looks westernized and extremely prosperous and capitalist and all the rest of it. So let's look now and think, which one's more eco-friendly? The one with almost no lighting. And Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 are global communism. That's what they want to do. That's the most. That's what they're bringing in. This is why this phrase watermelons, I don't know if you've heard of that phrase, watermelons, to describe being green on the outside, but actually communism red on the inside. And that seems to be what all this is about. So let me now go back. Let's go back. How do I come out of that? I want to come back
down at the bottom again, I think.
Yeah, let's just try that. Oh, that's where I want. Lovely. Back out of that. Good stuff. Now, the bit of information that has come to me recently, which has really concerned me, and this is where we get into some of the biblical connections, is something called the Draft International Covenant. Watch that language, Covenant on the Environment and Development. And the acronym is DICED. That's quite worrying, isn't it? Okay, so we have a lady called Ileana Johnson-Poor, who has written many articles. She's also given an extremely good talk on YouTube, which can be accessed through YouTube, talking about this Draft International Covenant, which is now in its 5th edition. It has not yet been ratified, but it was described in her article, and she put this in quotes, saying that this international covenant would be the highest form of law for human activity. Now, we know that the highest form of law for human activity is Torah.
Sure.
God's law. Nothing else. Nothing else.
It's strange that
And I'm
they
going to
use
just...
the word covenant in there for, where do you ever hear that coming from a UN source?
It's interesting. We have already, and I'm sure the US has as well, certainly Britain has ratified previous covenants, which were ratified decades ago. And we have to look at this, the important significance of this. I'm just going to do another little screen share here of, let's see if I can find it. Where am I? Hold on. This is the one I want. That's the one I want. All right, so this is her article, which is on the CanadaFreePress.com website. And I'm going to just quote from here. She says, she's talking about the fourth version of this covenant. Can you see this now?
Yes.
Yep, good. And so we have this is the fourth version, we're now in the fifth. And she said it was written to control all development tied to the environment and be the highest form of law for all human activity. The covenant's 79 articles, described in great detail in 242 pages, take sustainable development principles described in Agenda 21 and transform them into global law which supersedes all constitutions, including the US Constitution.
Oh my.
Now, that is extremely concerning, because I'm now going to take this back to the biblical part of this, which is so incredibly serious and important. All right, let me just stop share. That's brilliant. Covenants are important to God, even if they're entered into by deception. And I'm sure everyone who's going to listen to this is going to remember the story of the Gibeonites. The Gibeonites deceived Joshua and the heads of the congregation and were able to get a covenant with the children of Israel. And in the time of David, there was a famine. And the famine was a result of Saul trying to break that covenant. I think he was trying to drive the Gibeonites. He was trying to effectively correct what had happened, except that, of course, it stands. This is the bit that is so concerning, is that the covenant stood, even though it was entered into by the deception of the Gibeonites. We are in a very perilous situation when we have these things going on that we have no control over whatsoever. Donald Trump has just left the Paris Accord, hasn't he? He's decided that he doesn't want anything to do with the Paris Accord on climate. Does the Paris Accord count as a covenant? I don't know. But any agreement that you enter into, any vow, any oath, these things are binding, and we should be very, very concerned about this. It's not to be taken lightly. And there are various methods that they're going to use to get us where they want us to be, because the likes of you and I, most people are not going to willingly give up our livelihoods in order to live in the smart city. I mean, I don't think you'd want to do that. I know I wouldn't want to do that, but they have ways and means that they plan to do this.
So it's amazing that they say higher than any other law. Was that article, is that a pro or con article that you just cited?
That is a con article. She's writing against it. Now, what I will say is that the quote that I read out that is on that article, I have searched on the UN documents and it is not there. So whether it's not there now, whether it's been scrubbed, I can't say. But I can't imagine that she would put it in quotes if it wasn't something that she had originally read. And it is extremely concerning because I don't know if you're aware that very recently there was a Gentile sacrifice, a Gentile animal sacrifice conducted on one of the mountains outside Jerusalem to bring in the Noahide laws. And they're calling that again a covenant.
That's pretty shocking.
Were you aware of that?
No.
No.
Shocking.
And the Noahide laws are absolutely something that we must completely reject. It is very, very perilous times that we're living in right now.
Animal sacrifice?
Yeah.
Do you know who perpetrated that?
what I can do is I'll find the article that I read, which was in Breaking Israeli News, I think, and I'll send it to you. You can have a look.
Great.
It did go ahead. It was not well attended. It didn't turn into any international agreement, I'm glad to say. But wow, you know, what is going on in this world right now? It's very, very scary stuff. So let me move on to how they're going to achieve this. We are aware that the financial situation worldwide is incredibly perilous. There is an enormous amount of debt, and the banks only have to decide that they're going to pull the plug, and an awful lot of people are going to be out on the streets. They're going to be without money, without, you know, the businesses are going to close. All kinds of things are going to happen, which are going to be extremely damaging to human society as we know it right now. So financial collapse is one of the methods that they're going to be able to attain their new world order with, because obviously you have order out of chaos, don't you? So you've got to create the chaos first. The financial collapse, I think, is one of the things. The financial system has been so pumped up, the money supply has been so pumped up, it's going to be so much worse when it collapses than it is right now. Or than it would have been even in the 1930s, I think. But the second one is particularly
pumped up with currency without true value.
Yeah, exactly.
Lots of money, but no value behind it. Yeah, that's got to fail.
Yeah, it's going to fail at some point, and you see if they time it right, then they can get their goals out of it. That's the bit that concerns me. So we're just entering into a grand solar minimum. This has been noted by NASA. This was predicted by NASA, and 2019 was an absolutely devastating year, particularly in the US, but in China and other parts of the world, there have been crop failures. And this is very interesting because I believe it's going to last for about 30 years, this solar minimum. And what this means is a lack of sunspot activity. And the lack of sunspot activity means we're going to have unpredictable weather, which they're going to put down to global warming, of course. They can do this. They're just playing this sleight of hand in the press about what's really going on.
You said 30 years. Isn't this a regular phenomenon every 11 years?
The solar cycles are 11 years. The minima tend to be, I believe it's once every 200 years.
Oh, I see.
So if you look back to the Maunder minimum, there were, crop failures then, too much rain, the ground is too wet. That is an absolute disaster. And, America has really, really struggled this year because of that, with corn and soy and so forth. The fact that governments don't appear to be preparing for it is really concerning. There are no food stockpiles. There's a stockpile of money, apparently. But if there's no stockpile of food, it's not going to help, because you can't print food, as that's so often pointed out. And here's where it gets interesting. The prediction, and I've heard this from two different sources, is that 2023 will be the year without a harvest. Now, if we have a year without a harvest, it's going to be devastating, because we're going to be immediately into food rationing. You tie that into a financial collapse, and you're going to be able to get people into smart cities very quickly. People will drop everything.
Where do you get the prediction of 2023? Is this a general prediction?
Well, there is a biblical tie-in with this, and I think this is why that one just leapt out at me. I've heard it from two different sources. I've heard it from David Dubine, who runs a YouTube channel called Adapt 2030, when he talks about the grand solar minimum, and also from a guy called Christian, who runs a channel called Ice Age Farmer on YouTube. Both excellent, interesting sources, particularly the Ice Age Farmer. He has a really, really good resource which gives you information about what happened in previous minima, like the Maunder minimum and so on, what actually happened, because people starved to death. This was absolutely devastating, and because there just wasn't enough food. We should be better organized now. We have all of the global transport. We ought to be able to sort this out. But of course, if you put those resources in the hands of the few are going to have power over everybody, aren't they? Sure. So they're going to say to you, right, well, you want to be fed, you have to move to a smart city. And that's where it all ties in, of course, with the 5G, the surveillance. People may be tempted to accept biometrics or a chip. They may be told that they have to have forced vaccinations just to get food. There's lots of ways that they can bring in control through not preparing you for the grand solar minimum. And of course, there's really almost nothing you can do to prepare for a financial collapse unless you get out of debt is the one thing that you can do really for that, because it's going to affect everybody. I can't see how it's not. The second result of these two things that are coming, which kind of fit nicely with what they want with Agenda 21 and Agenda 22, is the rewilding of the United States. And this is not just the US. There are at least 2 rewilding projects taking place in the United Kingdom as well, one in Scotland and one in Wales. And these are, I believe, thousands of acres that are being put back to nature. Well, okay, how are we going to feed people then? Mm-hmm. Are we not going to feed people, or are we not going to have people to feed? Because if people starve to death, well, that's very worrying. So I'm going to just share this this image. This is you may have seen this map before. This is quite an old map. Simulated reserve and corridor system to protect biodiversity. And let me just move that. As mandated by the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Wildlands Project, UN and US Man and Biosphere Program, and various UN-US Heritage Programs, and NAFTA. And when we look at this, we see core reserves and corridors with little to no human use, and that is just a massive amount.
Yeah.
This is saying bears and coyote are more important than farming, right? That's what that is. That's turning America into a giant wildlife park.
It almost looks like deliberate extinction.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Normal use zones are in blue, so there's going to be some of those on this side, and there's a few little areas. This is not great resolution, this map. I couldn't find a better one, but you can see little areas there. It actually says cities of 10,000 people or more are the black dots, and it's really quite hard to see that there's much in this whole middle area here. This whole area, there just seems to be so few of those dots. If you look at California, that's going to be pretty much cleared apart from small areas of human use in here. And the buffer zones, the yellow areas, are going to have highly regulated use. Well, we're already seeing highly regulated use.
Oh, yeah.
If somebody is told that they can't gather their own rainwater off their roof, if they're told that they can't grow fruit and vegetables in their front yard, that's highly regulated before you start on what they have planned.
That's the
This
case
is
here.
really...
I can't do that.
What's that, sorry?
I can't do that. I can't have a vegetable garden in my yard.
No. This is the
grow
control.
Flowers, and I do, but
yeah,
nothing edible.
Yeah, nothing that's going to sustain you.
Right.
Because sustainability is, what does that mean? Surely sustainable is me growing fruit and veg, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But apparently not, because sustainable is whatever they want it to mean. And that's the problem with these goals, is that they are very much designed to be interpreted in whatever way suits those who are in power. It's not for our benefit. And you can clearly see it's not for our benefit.
No.
When we look at this, then we need to take it back again to biblical principles. What is going on here? How is this possible that this is happening? So we need to look, and I'm just going to, I'll do another share because I've actually got this and I need to be able to read it out. So this is an email. I'm just going to grab the text that I need from it because I want to actually share the right Bible verses and make sure people can actually go and look these up themselves. We have to be aware that this kind of thing that you're seeing here, this is something we brought upon ourselves. And it's really vitally important that we understand what all this means and where it's coming from. So let's have a look at what I said to this guy. I actually wrote this email to the guy who runs the Ice Age Farmer channel. And I'll just read from here. There's a specific and particular relevance to to do with the sabbatical years. Bearing in mind Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030, in fact, the next sabbatical year is 2023. And I am hearing that 2023 is the year without a harvest.
I had a feeling.
Well, that's very interesting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So what was that?
I said I had a feeling that was what you were going to say about 2023 with a biblical connection.
Yep. Yeah. And so we have not done what we were supposed to do. And in the Old Testament, God drove the people off the land if they did not obey and let the land rest and have her Sabbaths. So we have Leviticus 26, 32 to 35. And I'll just read this out. I will bring the land to desolation, and your enemies who dwell in it shall be astonished at it. I will scatter you among the nations and draw out a sword after you. Your land shall be desolate and your cities waste. Then the land shall enjoy its Sabbaths. As long as it lies desolate and you are in your enemy's land, then the land shall rest and enjoy its Sabbaths. As long as it lies desolate, it shall rest, for the time it did not rest on your Sabbaths when you dwelt in it. In 2 Chronicles 36, 20 to 21, we're told, and those who escaped from the sword he carried away to Babylon, where they became servants to him and his sons, until the rule of the kingdom of Persia, to fulfill the word of Yahweh by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed her Sabbaths. As long as she lay desolate, she kept Sabbath to fulfill 70 years. Well, how long have we not been keeping the sabbatical years? How long have farmers not been keeping the sabbatical years?
I don't think that
I
in
mean,
the United States.
From the founding of... No. And then we have... I was talking here about the rewilding, which is what I've just covered with that map. Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 sees us removed from the land into so-called smart cities, which I call smart slums, because they're going to be just horrible, horrible places to live. And it's interesting that the 5G is another thing that they're saying has to be in place by 2023. Interesting. What have they got planned? It just really makes you wonder, doesn't it? From Isaiah 34.
We did a forum on 5G, and we learned some very startling things concerning the length of the wave and the fact that there are going to have to be low towers every place to support that. That's going to expose all life to this microwave energy that is destructive, and short waves, and very, very bad for not only human health, but even plants and animals. Yeah. And the fact is we simply have no idea whether it's safe or not. No testing. We have no idea whether it's done. No. And it really is designed to be everywhere. What is particularly interesting in the UK is that there are certain cities that have been designated as the first rollout cities for 5G, and they have gone in and literally sawn down all the trees. They've gone in and just sawn down all the trees because leaves will disrupt the signal. Yes. And so, well, how on earth does that fit with the idea of sustainability and being eco-friendly? Chopping trees down? It was never about the environment, was it? Obviously, there is a higher agenda here. People a lot smarter than we are putting this together. For our own good. So when we think about the rewilding, I think that Isaiah 34, 8 to 17 is particularly pertinent. For it is the day of Yahweh's vengeance, the year of recompense for the cause of Zion. Its stream shall be turned into pitch, and its dust into brimstone, and its land shall become burning pitch. It shall not be quenched night or day. Its smoke shall ascend forever, from generation to generation. It shall lie waste. No one shall pass through it forever and ever. But the pelican and the porcupine shall possess it. Also the owl and the raven shall dwell in it. And he shall stretch out over it the line of confusion and the stones of emptiness. They shall call its nobles to the kingdom, but none shall be there. And all its princes shall be nothing. And the thorns shall come up in its palaces, nettles and brambles in its fortresses. It shall be a habitation of jackals, a courtyard for ostriches. The wild beasts of the desert shall also meet with the jackals, and the wild goat shall bleat to its companion. Also the night creature shall rest there and find for herself a place of rest.
There the arrow snake shall make her nest and lay eggs and hatch and gather them under her shadow. There also shall the hawks be gathered, every one with her mate. Search from the book of Yahweh and read. Not one of these shall fail. Not one shall lack her mate. For my mouth has commanded it, and his spirit has gathered them. He has cast the lot for them, and his hand has divided it among them with a measuring line. They shall possess it forever. From generation to generation they shall dwell in it. Well, if they're going to rewild the United States, that seems horribly pertinent, doesn't it?
Yeah,
that seems absolutely spot on.
Mm-hmm.
That's the bit that we should be particularly concerned about. And so really, the important thing is for us to consider what we can actually do as believers.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you. What do we do? You see, in the Yahad, our main objective and goal is to take part in the restoration of all creation, that cosmic vow that we find in the book of Enoch that's been left behind. How can we do that? We're still looking for ways to do that, but we're starting to come upon those ways now through these kind of studies. And we're seeing something we can do. So I'm looking forward to hearing what the remedy is, if you have it.
Yeah, we have a remedy, because our God is good and our God is compassionate and he's merciful. And our next sabbatical year is 2023. So what we need to think about is we need to think about how we can prepare. And this is our personal preparation. This is for each of us to consider what we normally eat and what we need to have put away. It's so vital for the earth to have her Sabbaths. And the very first thing that we need to do is repent that we've not been doing this. We've not been keeping this. Now, this information about the sabbatical years comes particularly from Joseph Dumond. He's done a huge amount of work on this subject. I don't know if you've come across him before.
Yes.
But his work on this subject, he has studied this out, and he has actually found the confirmations of these years. So we do know when they are. But I will say, if we didn't know when they were, we should have just done it anyway. We should have picked a year and said, well, we don't know if it's right, but we should have done it anyway. 7 years should have been a sabbatical year, and we've not done that. But we do know that the next sabbatical year is 2023. The sabbatical year begins at Aviv. And so we need to not plant crops in 2023. We need to store food which grows of the earth. So this is going to be all of the things that come from plants. So your grains, your fruits, your vegetables, things that come from trees, again, all of those things, we need to store those things from the previous year. And I mean, if you're buying stuff now, if you're buying to prep, which a lot of people are, then as soon as you start seeing 2023 on things as a use by date, why not start stocking up on them? Sure. Meat, eggs, and dairy are fine. But if you have your own animals, then you need to remember to stock food for them, because that's obviously, you don't want to be buying food during that year for them either, because that will be stuff that's been grown in the sabbatical year. So you might need to think about how you're going to fund this, because it's an important thing. A lot of us don't have much to live on. In the last sabbatical year, I remember writing to Joseph Dumond and saying, I just, I'm kind of new to this and I don't know what to do, and I don't have much money, and how do I do this? And he wrote back and said, do the best you can. For every meal that you don't have to, and God really did bless what I did. I went out and I bought myself as many frozen vegetables as I could, and I filled up my freezer, and they lasted and lasted and lasted. It was astonishing. We need to be thinking about preparing for a 15-month period, because we need to think beyond the end of the sabbatical year to when the harvest would be available from the planting in the following year. So it's good to plan for that. So maybe you need to buy yourself another freezer.
Well, if we're going Aviv to Aviv, we're talking about March to March. Generally, at least in the northern hemispheres, there's nothing much planted in March. They wait a little later than that, and the harvest isn't until October. So I can see the point there.
Yeah, we have to think about that. If you're growing your own stuff, obviously that gives you some autonomy, and it's good to be preparing to do that kind of thing if you have the facility to do it, even if it's only a window box. Something is better than nothing. But during that year, you can eat what grows of itself. So if you have fruit trees, you can pick and eat the fruit. It's the general idea is that your garden should be open to anyone to come in.
Yes.
And that means if you have a vegetable garden and you normally fence it off to keep things like deer or whatever out, rabbits maybe, you have to let it down. You have to let that fence down. You have to let the wild animals come in and they get to eat them too, and so on. And the other thing that you must also be aware of is that you're not to harvest in that year. Just because your tree is producing a lot, don't be putting it into store. It's to be handed out. It's to be, eaten, as it were, in that year, or left, to, as it were, to rot, whatever falls on the ground and so on. So you need to prepare and plan ahead accordingly. We have time to think about how we're going to fund this, what you need to do. There's lots of ways that you can think about maybe putting a little aside now each month to prepare for that. And it's important to pay attention to what you eat because otherwise it could be 15 months of beans and rice and you could get very bored with that. So you want to make sure that you do stock up on the things that you actually eat. And that's incredibly important to think about that. It is a very, very special time. And it's a time that we have not honored. We have not honored these sabbatical years. And it's just such a vital thing that we get back to this, that we repent to God. We say, we didn't know. And now that we know, we've got to get under the protection of the law. His instructions are there for our good. Mm-hmm. And it's just something very, very important.
And you're convinced that Joseph has the right year?
I'm convinced. I think he has 40 references now for the sabbatical years that he's found historically, and I think he's got 2 for the Jubilees. Mm-hmm. So I would say that's
as good as you can.
That has to be. Mm-hmm. Sorry.
That's as good as you can get. I mean, there's very little information about it, and of course, lots and lots of speculation. I've tried to stay out of that speculation because, we don't want one more amateur in there. Leave it to the ones that have the knowledge to ferret it out and pass it on.
Yeah, I think Joseph has done a huge amount of work. And I know that there are people out there who are quite critical of him because they accuse him of date setting as far as, that's something that he's very open and very honest, that what he sees and what he doesn't see that fits what he has been suggesting. But we do know the sabbatical years well enough to be able to say that we really should be preparing to keep them, because that is the one thing that will stop us being removed from the land.
Right.
Because otherwise we're going to be in those smart cities with everyone else.
This is great information. I mean, this is a great warning, and it's not at the very edge of night, so to speak. We have a couple years here to think about this and to do something and the Sabbath is a way of bringing restoration to creation, one that hasn't been practiced for years and years and years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In my country, historically, we used to have a 3-field system, and so once every 3 years a field would be left fallow. But it wasn't for the whole of creation, as it were. It wasn't for the whole of nature. It was just for these fields and so on. But that is not practiced anymore, in the sense that chemicals are so easy to apply. Yep, which is not the answer. It doesn't help the soil to be healthy. God has given us instructions. They are not difficult. They're not onerous. If you think about the whole of Torah being sufficient to run an entire society, I can't see how anyone could say it was onerous. It's not. It's a blessing to us to be under the protection of that law, because that law is our protection. It's real strong guidance for us. We do need to do it. And the fact that we haven't is the reason why all of this is possible. All of this that is being done, that's heading our way, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, the smart agenda, it's heading our way because we haven't done this.
Right.
And we need to get back to it.
Thank you. My question's done. You want to continue?
That's the end of my notes. So if there's anything else you want to talk about, go ahead.
No, I think that this is something that, well, you're right about Joseph. Some people think that he is out in left field someplace. And because of that, a lot of people I know don't pay any attention to him. But I think this is one case, and I haven't kept up with him the last year or so. This is one case that maybe we need to look in that direction. If he's put so much work into that, and we have to believe that he was anointed in doing so, and if he also takes a liberal point of view in this, that is to do the best you can, I think this deserves another look. Maybe I can get him on here. And
that would be a great idea.
Yes, I will try to do that. And I want to thank you, Liz. This has been an eye-opener for me. And of course, we want to use your interview as a jumping off point for our own discussions in our forum. And perhaps I can send you an invite. Maybe you could come into one of those if the timing is arranged such. But again, thank you so very much for taking this time with me. And
it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Yahweh be with you as you
thank you, and you
find his will for not only for yourself, but for the rest of us too.
Yeah, this is so crucial. We must seek him